I think when you think about crypto in terms of the vision of crypto, the purebred vision of crypto, it thinks of it in isolation to the existing financial system and the financial payment system. But the reality is, when you come back to the ground, that is a long-term horizon for where crypto might end up in.
The electric car thing is not just about the motors in the vehicle. It goes it speaks to the nature, the culture of the companies, I believe. And so we are seeing even great car companies that have been making cars for years upon years, trying to switch to electric is a problem for them.
The thing is, it's not about the offset and the pollution matching. It's about there really isn't any incentive for these guys to emit less. There really isn't any incentive for these guys to pollute less. So at the end of the day, we're still back to quote unquote where we started.
There's a saying that always goes that, in a gold rush, he who makes the most money is the one who sells shovels. And we are definitely in a gold rush of AI of sorts. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tech Roundtable.
Hey, welcome.
Dominic, how have you been?
I have been trying. But I'm happy. 2024 is over.
Did it suck?
Let's just say it went better than I expected. I'm actually pretty pleased about the year. Accomplished a couple of things here and there. Had some pretty big wins, decent wins. Looking forward to 25. I think it's gonna be a better year. But I also haven't seen you in the studio, since 24. So how's yours been? How's the Christmas festivities and stuff as you get into the new year?
My 2024 was great. Statistically, 2025 cannot be as good as 2024, but I'm still keeping my hopes up. I'm praying it goes well. But nonetheless, what a year it was. One, this was the year we did, 2024 was the year we did Tech Roundtable.
Oh, yeah.
So
I started this last year.
Thank you all for joining with us for how many months now?
Really, thank you for hanging on.
Yes.
for staying.
For those who wanted to hit who hit unsubscribe but forgot to hit confirm, you're welcome.
You're welcome. Stay there. Stay confused.
Hang in there.
Anyway,
So, we'll move to our first story.
Wait. Bitcoin hit 100K. But anyway, that's a...
It did?
We're good. We're happy.
Interesting.
Yes.
And speaking of crypto...
Oh! That was golden.
This leads us to our first story.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I'd want to get your thoughts, Dominic, seeing as though I don't believe in crypto that much. And you are much more steeped in crypto than I am.
Well.
So, Kenya seeks public participation on crypto bill after IMF warns against risk. So, I really want to hear your breakdown, one, on the crypto landscape, and more so, in this case, now that we are seeing government propose a bill around crypto and what that means. And do you think that really has any meaningful change, and to what extent that might look like?
Yeah. I think for somebody who's never really giving props to the government in any occasion, I have to take that L with this one and actually say that I think this is a very good step forward for Kenya as a whole with this particular piece of legislation. And I say that because of a couple of reasons, yeah? So, one, I've through my reading, because I read through the bill and then I just wrote down like a couple of things that I thought stood out for me. I thought it was a very balanced approach in terms of legislation, especially for a first bill with regards to the crypto industry. And I say that because, number one, I started by comparing it against other countries, how other countries have approached crypto regulation. Like guys in the US are a bit more heavy-handed right now because there's aspects of trying to really classify assets in terms of tokens. Is this a stable coin? Is this a crypto token? And what are the fundamentals behind this particular crypto token? Is it a security? Is it not? So there's this thing called the Howey test that's really clouded a lot of crypto regulation in the US. There's countries like South Africa that I think has a very defined body of legislation with regards to crypto. And there's also Singapore that I think to date is still one of the more balanced approaches towards approaching crypto regulation. And so the things that I really liked the most about this particular crypto regulation in Kenya is, beyond this, if you are trying to participate as a virtual assets provider in Kenya, the only thing you were slapped with was a letter of warning to banks from guys like CBK and CMA not to participate or not to interact with people who are participating in crypto. But what this bill actually does is that it begins by, I think, the one thing that I think they did really well was to avoid the most controversial aspects about crypto. So they're not trying to be the world leader in saying that this is an asset, or sorry, this is a token, or this is a security, like those things that are really still being figured out by the whole world. So I think they really avoided the things that are most controversial in the world around things like, is this a security? Is this not a security? Things that are still being figured out by a huge part of the world.
Let me catch you there and take you a step back, and perhaps you can give us an overview of the bill for those who haven't read it.
That's actually, yeah, okay.
And then just give us from a layman's point of view,
okay,
what's the point of the bill? What's it trying to seek?
So let's
and then
start.
we can get into what you find interesting.
There are two bodies in Kenya two main bodies that have pretty much been mandated with the task of authorizing anything to do with crypto activities in Kenya. That's the Capital Markets Authority and the Central Bank of Kenya, which is interesting because the way Kenya has taken an approach to this bill is by defining the different players who are virtual asset service providers, among which would be guys like a virtual asset wallet provider. Those are guys who are trying to do custodial wallet services, right? People who are trying to help people store tokens and crypto assets in general. Those are virtual asset wallet providers. There's also virtual asset exchanges, and these are your Binances. These are the guys who are helping the transfer, the conversion of a lot of these assets, doing things like trading, clearing. They've been defined very distinctly under a category, and also the regulator who's going to be over them. I think for the key ones that I saw, they're mostly going to be under the central bank. And then for guys who are doing things like holding virtual assets in trust on behalf of other people, those guys are going to be under the Capital Markets Authority. Then there's also guys like the virtual asset payment processors. And those, I think, for me, are also like where I'm also particularly interested, because that involves guys who are doing things as payment gateways, people who are trying to move between virtual assets and fiat currencies and so on and so forth. So what the regulation has really done well, in my opinion, is classify and category people. There are still questions to be had. Another thing that it's done that's really important is that it's made it mandatory to have a license as a virtual asset service provider to participate in crypto. And that's an annual license. And the details of it, obviously, have been left outside of the primary piece of legislation. And I think you know why. So that these bodies that are authorizing will decide on the actual fees for the licenses. And those things are usually subject to change depending on the prevailing things. Because I'm guessing some politics will be at play. I'm just saying because, I'm being a pragmatic individual here. But yeah, politics being at play, they will change the pricing of the licenses and discuss different nuances around like the actual cost. But licensing is going to be mandatory and it's going to be done by specified bodies. So those are the main things, I think, in my opinion, that were captured in that bill.
Let me ask a question. Because we're talking about crypto, whose, the main claim to why we use crypto is to go against an intermediary source of truth. We don't have a central source of truth. The network is the source of truth, right? We don't have anyone, basically, in a nutshell, I'm saying it's like we're skirting government. How does this play back now that it seems that you're seeking permission from the government to use a tool which is primarily intended to go around the need? It goes against the whole peer-to-peer
aspect.
Yeah.
To be honest, that's a good question. But the problem is that I think when you think about crypto in terms of the vision of crypto, the purebred vision of crypto, it thinks of it in isolation to the existing financial system and the financial payment system. But the reality is when you come back to the ground, that is a long-term horizon for where crypto might end up in. But where we are at right now is that we actually need to move a lot of the assets that we have to become crypto assets. You need to move a lot of the fiat that you're holding, or a lot of the fiat value, into crypto value. And you see, at that place, it interfaces with central governments. It interfaces with central treasuries. It actually interfaces with the economy of a particular state. So, number one, it's almost always diametrically opposed to like the existing financial system in a particular country. But you cannot avoid the fact that you're going to be moving value both into crypto and out of crypto back into the economies of a particular state. Because really, what is an economy? It's when I can spend money to you to gain a particular need or good or service.
Goods or service.
Yeah. And at this particular point, most of crypto is still not legal tender for a lot of things. But it is a means of value in terms of other things like, like stable coins being used for money transfers and things like that. I mean, a very interesting statistic is that I think the stablecoin volume last year almost doubled or tripled what Visa processed for the whole year in stablecoin volume. We're talking like over $2 trillion worth of value was moved as stablecoins, and people are swiping cards all over the world each and every day trying to do transactions. So there's still a lot of utility for it, but we still have to interplay with the real world. And I think because of that, there is need for regulation that identifies the innovation that it brings, but also balances it out with the needs of the state. In which case, I mean, like, actually a big part of this bill that, in my opinion, was left very intentionally vague was things around taxation. And the only preceding piece of legislation, I think, around taxation, from my reading at least, was something like the digital service tax in Kenya, which is very blanket, does not specifically apply to crypto. So that, I think, essentially means that still crypto is under that particular piece of legislation. So that's interesting. Or maybe like we can get a lawyer or someone who's well versed in this to kind of explain this to us. But in my opinion, like there are some things that they really I think intentionally avoided, and there are some things that they wanted to address. But those are the most critical things, because now what this allows us to do is that if you are interested in participating as a player in this space, you can actually go and get a license, and you can open a bank account legally, and you can tell them like, hey, I'm a virtual asset service provider. I manage custodial wallets for clients, or I do payment processing for clients with virtual assets. And you can still get a bank account, and you can still trade with the bank, and you can still move volume, and it's not going to be taboo. People don't have to set up shells on shells on shells, or move a lot of that value into economies that already have this available. You see, so that's a lot of missed opportunity, I think, even on a taxation level for countries that don't have this particular piece of legislation. That's why I think in general it's overall good.
Interesting. And we'd love to hear the thoughts from all the crypto bros. Hey, bros.
Bros.
All the crypto bros.
Yeah, but it's a good step forward. It's a good step forward. I think a couple of things very important. If you are a player in crypto, tell us, like, does this piece of legislation actually fit into how you are currently participating? If you're a P2P trader, what does this mean for you? If you're trying to move from USDT to USD or to Kenya shillings, and you've actually been in that business for a long while, does this thing make it more complicated for you, or does it make it more confusing for you? And in that case, by the way, this bill that was announced is actually a request for comments from the public. So I think we still have a chance to kind of participate in it and have our input in especially a lot of the controversial things. I think on a generic basis, it kind of touches the more important sweet spots for a first piece of legislation. But there's still a lot more work to be done. And when it becomes implemented by the authorities, that's where rubber meets. It's going to meet the road in terms of implementation. So I'm very curious. What do you guys think about this particular bill, especially if you're interested in it? So we're going to switch gears. And by gears, I mean shifting gears to vehicle stuff.
Smooth.
Anyway, okay. That was dumb. We're going to shift to some car stories here. And the car story that has particularly been making waves over the last month or so, given to their very cute ad, and them deciding to take a mental health break. Anyway, guys, Jaguar has decided to take a gap year to focus their efforts on EV production. So, Evans, I'm very curious. Do you think this is a hoot or moot? Like, type of strategy for Jaguar? Number 2, do you think EV is actually a trend that is worth considering for car companies, that they should essentially like maybe cut their businesses and focus on this like for the long haul? And is there like really a possible bounce back for companies like Jaguar, given the, controversy of the ad? And we're also seeing companies like Honda, companies like Nissan, who signed an MOU, I think like just a week or 2 ago, to come together to because they've noticed that Chinese companies like BYD are really taking over, especially with in the EV space. BYD, I think Xiaomi as well is a big player here. So do you think there's actually like a valid case to be made for this transition of companies into the EV mode, into the EV way of thinking?
Yeah. So Jaguar is an interesting story in and of itself. But I think the reason why it caught our interest is that it represents more of a shift. Also, it's a representation of what I believe is going on in the motor industry. In that, if there's one industry that has really been shaken up by technology, it has to be cars. From the moment Tesla, became a thing and went mainstream, everyone else has kind of seemed to be catching up. But something else that is quite interesting about it is that the car industry has been very rigid with the same number of players for the longest time. In fact, if anything, it has only been losing smaller and smaller players, while the bigger ones
consolidating as well.
Yeah, companies owning companies. But since the electrification of vehicles, we've seen so many more entrants into the market, and they're not just entrants in a small way. Now, some might fail. That's a given in any business. Q, the Fisker brand.
Yeah.
But we've seen entrants who come in not as underdogs, but as big
Heavy
players
hitters
in their own right. Xiaomi is just a phone or a tech company.
Xiaomi is a phone company.
And yet they come in at the same level of a Mercedes or a BMW or a Toyota.
Actually, more
or
by market cap.
if not bigger.
The
And
more
so
by market cap
we
right
find it
now.
quite interesting. And so when I look at Jaguar in particular, this is not their first time building an electric car. They did one actually, I think more than 5 years ago. So for me, it stands out as them, grasping at straws. They want to do one last Hail Mary to do like a kind of a rebirth of their brand, because to kind of to make it in this in this cutthroat market is hard. And at the same time, we can look at other legacy brands in the industry, and particularly the bigger ones, who have each had their own take. At the beginning, most of them were trying to go all electric. Companies like Volvo talk about how they're going full in on by, is it like 2020, 2030, all their models will be electric. And we've seen more recently them take a step back. So it's interesting, and we'd want to hear from our viewers what they think about it, because it seems to be something that kind of is splitting splitting the market both ways, where legacy car companies are kind of taking a step back. Guys like Toyota are really fully into hybrids, as opposed to, they're just dipping their toes in the water, even though there were people who earlier on, before the emergence of Tesla and the like, were trying to go for, or trying to really go deep into electric vehicles. So that's interesting to see. Now, Jaguar also in particular is an interesting brand, because they fall under the curse that is the British car companies, where they really found it hard to make a profit even before the electric days. And so just keeping all that in mind, I don't feel as bullish on their comeback as I would of in other companies, but maybe that will make a change. Of course, by going on this tangent, they in a sense are trying to leave behind the vestiges of their brand or their heritage, quote unquote. And so they're coming in almost as a new entrant, because no one will be able to point at a new Jaguar and say, this is we can see how
like we can see the growth,
how the models or how the brand has evolved. This is them saying, take us at the same level as you take a BYD. And so to do that, they have to be very compelling. And something that we'll also note about the legacy car companies, that it seems that they do struggle with the technology. I can cue I call to memory just the fact that companies like Volkswagen bought into a company like Rivian.
Yeah.
Primarily because of the tech, primarily because of the software. And so you're seeing a legacy company that would typically struggle with technology, give everything up, take a gap year, take a year of no sales, no new models. I think the best they can do during that
with
time
an
is
ad that went
marketing.
wrong. But hey,
The best thing they can do at that time is only marketing and try to come back bigger and stronger. And I just don't see that happening.
No, but I kind of disagree though. Like when you wake up and smell the roses, like everyone is aware of the fact that it's almost like you can't ignore the EVs. When you look at the top 3 in the world, number 1, market cap here, the Tesla's market cap is around $1.3 trillion right now, right? The company that's following Tesla, which is Toyota, that's been doing cars for more than 4 times the age of existence of Tesla, is at $300 billion, thereabout. And the following companies after that are tech companies that are doing EV in China, Xiaomi and BYD. Like, it's almost impossible to ignore the fact that the whole, like, the utility for electric cars is just making sense for it being the future of mobility. And number 2, you see, I think Tesla is also winning not because of just being able to produce electric cars. I think BYD is producing electric cars, but BYD is still not even half as valuable, actually even a quarter as valuable as Tesla, because Tesla has positioned itself more of a tech company than it has a car production company. So it's like the Apple of motor vehicles, if you ask me. And so, like, I think for Jaguar, it's a very logical, strategic sense to go all in on electric if they can be able to align the fundamentals. I think where they went wrong was just the marketing. The marketing was a bit off. But also where they went wrong as well was not being able to carry their customers, like their old heritage customers, into the new era, like, and kind of communicating that vision in a compelling way. Because that marketing was a big miss. But when you start seeing all these small companies beginning to consolidate, like the Honda and the Nissans, like there's just so much, like there's so much to be made. And there's a strong case to be made about having to go all in on electric, in my opinion. So no, I don't know if I buy into that whole aspect. I
agree with you.
I don't know what they're pulling back. I don't think
I agree with you in general. I just disagree with you in particular.
Okay.
In general, yes, EV is the way to go. But you see, we look at the particulars of a car company that was struggling to get by even before the electric car revolution. And so to assume that all the benefits, all the good things of being a tech car company will just go to them just because they've said to go full in on electric, that doesn't hold. It's probably still the same company with a lot of the same people. I mean, if it was that easy, all these BMWs, Mercedes would not have a problem just switching to electric. So it goes beyond just deciding. The electric car thing is not just about the motors in the vehicle. It goes it speaks to the nature, the culture of the companies, I believe. And so we are seeing even great car companies that have been making cars for years upon years, trying to switch to electric is a problem for them. And now that's why I agree with you in general that the electric car companies they're basically the future. And a lot of everyone building cars will have to go electric one or the other. But just to assume that because I've gone electric, that means I'm going to survive, or I'm going to make it when I didn't even survive beforehand, I think that's where the fallacy lies.
Okay, yeah. I mean, in terms of Jaguar's track record, I kind of agree with that. I mean, they're a British car, they're a British car company. But hey, Land Rover, Land Rover is doing well.
And that's what makes it interesting as well. They're owned by the same owner.
Yeah, is it VW?
No, Tata Motors.
Tata. But Tata still owns Jaguar, and Tata owns Land Rover as well.
Yes.
Land Rover is killing it, but Jaguar is dying.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Why is that?
I think Land Rover was able to find a sweet spot with regards to selling the brand, where people know. I think there was a market research that showed that most of the consumers know Range Rover than they do Land Rover.
That's actually true. Many people don't even know Range Rover is owned by Land Rover. Some people. Actually.
And so that just goes to exceptional marketing, where they've been able to craft a brand that is much more valuable than it is. A Range Rover is much more valuable as a brand than it is as a vehicle per se. No, it's not just what the car offers. And so that has helped them to really grow to the point where the highest selling vehicle is the most expensive, and that's usually unheard of. That's something that's only limited to luxury status.
in luxury
And
cars.
so Jaguar is kind of in the same they're still a luxury brand, but they haven't been able to market themselves to the same extent. They haven't found the same level of success.
Yeah.
And arguably that still applies to a lot of, again, the British car brands as well.
Yeah.
And
Is it Alfa Romeo?
no, Alfa Romeo is Italian.
Aston Martin is
Aston
definitely
Martin is it's part
British.
owned by Daimler, Mercedes, I think.
And then Stellantis, like those two Stellantis brands.
Yes.
But Stellantis is Dutch, right? Like
I
the
believe
Fiat,
it's Italian.
Chrysler.
The Fiat Chrysler Association
Yeah.
merged with Renault to become the Stellantis brand.
Anyway, guys, we can riff off about cars for a hot minute. But
we need to move on.
We need to move
and
on.
And speaking of holes in the ozone.
Holes in the what?
There's something interesting that you had brought up,
Yeah.
and I think we'd like to share, which is about carbon credits, the carbon credit situation in Kenya. Now, for me...
Really in Africa, to be honest.
In Africa.
Yeah. But anyway, let's just zero in.
Yeah. So for our viewers, I'd really like you to give us an intro into first getting an overview of carbon credits. And now particularly to why we're bringing it up here is we want to understand, with regards to these carbon credits agreements, the voluntary... How
Markets.
binding is it on the voluntary on the markets? The license, does it really just act as a get out of jail for free card for companies or countries that are still continuing to pollute? And who sets the price and the standards?
Okay, so let's break it down. Let's break it down from what it is to why I think this is a very important piece. So let's start with carbon credits to just kind of begin to understand the whole space and what that means. Greenhouse gases, particularly gases such as CO2, really punch holes in the ozone, as you said. But they also it causes a lot of climate shifts and climate change, things like global warming, melting of the ice caps, and so on and so forth, as has been actually quote unquote scientifically justified. Some might say proven, but yeah, scientifically backed. So I think the nations around in the Paris Climate Agreement came together to say, hey, we want to extract a lot more CO2 in the market, and so we want to build an incentive structure around this, so that companies that are not companies, like countries, and actually also companies that are actively engaging in the efforts of extracting CO2 can find a market for those guys who are polluting and adding a lot more CO2 in the market, so that they can offset the imbalance of the pollution versus what's being extracted. How do they
extract the CO2?
That is a good thing. So you extract CO2 by doing certain things such as planting trees, living conservancies without overly developing them. Actually, a shift to electric cars, e-mobility, that's also a huge trend that's being justified as well towards CO2 emissions, because you see electric vehicles do not really emit a lot of CO2. So these companies and these countries that are heavy polluters, and we're talking about mostly the Western world and a lot of the developed, actually even the East, when we're talking about China, a lot of the heavily industrialized and polluting countries are finding a market in countries that are quote unquote offsetting the emissions by doing these activities. And so how it's done is that carbon credits are actually priced at metric tons of carbon, of CO2. So if you can be able to make a case and validate that a particular metric ton of CO2 has been extracted, that typically is sold for around, it's supposed to be typically sold for around $40 to $80. And that is now what is referred to as a carbon credit. And so companies and states and organizations and companies engage in the activity of buying those carbon credits to have it on themselves as their efforts to pretty much offset their pollution. So that is the framework, that is the groundwork. But there's a couple of things that's very interesting and very broken about this whole ecosystem. And yeah, I'm not an activist, I'll start by saying that, but I think it's a very interesting thing. I can't say. But here's the thing. When you come to the ground, number one, the price is rarely what people say. So these things usually sell for different rates. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to tell sovereign states what they need to agree on for a price for carbon credits. You really can't technically do that. I can always take, the way in Kenya we say hatuwezi kosania bei. Yeah, we'll always price it at whatever we feel is comfortable. And so what essentially happens is that a lot of the buyers of carbon credits end up being the ones, in my opinion, who set the price for what the carbon credits need to be priced at. And what does that do? So, in my opinion, it still gives them the license to continue polluting. Like, it really does. It really, like, what's essentially happening on the ground is the countries that are still polluting are still now gonna overpollute because they can still be able to squeeze in and negotiate rates for carbon credits that work for them. So essentially that's them getting a license to continue polluting. And the whole purpose in the beginning of the day, which was reducing CO2 emissions, in my opinion, is becoming like a whole moot exercise. And it's a very difficult thing to try and say that, hey, we want to price carbon credits at a particular amount or a particular value. You have to bring on the table and put that in agreement, let's say in one of these UN council things. But then again, how do you enforce that? Like it's a voluntary market and it's very hard to be able to, like, I think, set the price on a regulatory level.
Yeah, so I was going to ask then why is it that pricing, why is it that pricing is particularly a problem if two states can agree on how much they're going to charge?
Yes. So
if we know how can quantify the level of pollution and the level of the carbon credit to be, if we can give that equivalency between the two, then isn't pricing just between the two states?
Yes. Pricing, I think it's a problem because, you see, there's always a secondary goal here. Pricing was supposed to create an incentive structure, but the underlying goal was to reduce emissions, right? But if I can be able to buy my carbon credits for cheap, that means I can just factor that as a COGS, like as a piece of COGS for whatever company I'm doing. So for all the data centers or all the cars that Tesla is going to produce, as long as they know they can always get, like, 2.3 million metric tons from Kenya for like $10 per ton, that's a small $23 million spend for 10 years of production. Like,
but isn't that okay as long as the offset
so the thing
and
is,
the pollution match?
The thing is, it's not about the offset and the pollution matching. It's about there really isn't any incentive for these guys to emit less. There really isn't any incentive for these guys to pollute less. So at the end of the day, we're still back to quote unquote where we started. Another thing, and there's another problem as well. There's one problem that I haven't talked about, is that who really reaps the benefits of carbon credits? So let's say if me, I'm Kenya and I've sold my carbon credits to Facebook and Meta and Netflix, etc. Does this really translate back down to the communities or the taxpayers, or how is this structured all the way back down to become a benefit? Because you see, to say that we've planted trees, that means that's land that we could use for, setting up a factory, or that's land that we could use for farming or grazing or whatever. And it also spills down into like a story about this conservancy that's in northern Kenya called, I think it's called NRT, Northern Rangelands Trust. And these guys manage land the size of Slovakia to do this. Yeah, Slovenia or Slovakia. I don't know. It's one of those lands.
It's Slovenia.
Yeah, but it's Slovenia. But anyway, they manage land the size of that to do this thing called rotational grazing, which is essentially telling the communities not to graze at a particular place because we want the grass there to, absorb as much CO2, quote unquote. And there's such a humongous chain of middlemen intermediating that conservancy and that whole operation that the gains that go back to the community for the piece of land that they're having to forgo for their quote unquote traditional things is like, it's like peanuts, man. It's like this whole incentive structure is broken at the core because of the benefiting players. One, it doesn't meet the goal that it needs to. And then 2, the people who are actually paying for the price of the carbon credits never reap the benefits of it. So that's my argument about why it's broken.
I think I have to disagree with you there, but not entirely. I think to say that it hasn't addressed the issue with regards to pollution, where it's like we're back to where we started. I don't think that's the case, because, like we said, if someone has put in the effort to the plant trees as with the incentive of offsetting the pollution in order to get the carbon credits, then we are not at where we began, because whoever was still polluting to create whatever goods and products or whatever they were doing, whatever business services they were providing, that was still going to continue. But we still have the product. Where I agree with you is specifically in this case, once again, where someone has paid the cost, but it's not the conservancy. It's the people who were using that land. So my problem there is not so much with, I wouldn't say it's broken to the core, at its core. For me, I see it as a problem of somewhat governance, because in a sense, if that land is meant to be for grazing, what is someone going to do?
So you and I both know.
Appropriating that land for something else.
Exactly. You and I both know. We're very free market type people. This, at its core, is very socialist, in my opinion. Yeah, like at least from the guys who are selling. See,
it's about not making money.
Yeah, like people are not gonna make money. Like the communities are never gonna make money out of it. It's always the government, and even then,
it's the government.
It's the
private enterprise. Offers a service.
So they
sell carbon credits.
Well, I'll leave that for actually the audience to kind of confirm that detail, but you can fact check me on that. I am very certain that the biggest players in terms of supply of carbon credits and the guys who are selling are either mediated or intermediated by the government. And so the government has a say in how much is being made and also how the funds are going to be received. Number 2, even the companies and the organizations that are doing that are almost rarely the ones responsible for the efforts that are going for setting up the carbon credits. So you'll find that somebody will sell carbon credits, but it's because they've, let's say, consolidated a bunch of conservancies together, right? And so they say for their marketing cost.
And these are conservancies that are not designed for the purposes of getting
so
carbon credits.
You just layer on carbon credits as an additional feature, and then you say something like, oh yeah, wildlife protection, and like do not graze here, and all those very fun things that they like to add on top. So at the end of the day, the benefits never really get back down to the people who suffer the most because of the opportunity cost of participating in this whole carbon credit ecosystem. And maybe I don't know enough about it, but from what I'm seeing, it's just another, I feel like it's a ruse.
So if I read you correctly, the problem here is that the people who are selling the carbon credits are not paying the price of producing that carbon credit. They pass that cost to the herders.
To the herders, to the communities,
who now
to the
have
people.
to find
who now have
more
to find
places to graze.
Exactly.
Different
or
places.
Limited scope.
Okay.
That at the heart of it for me is the biggest conversation that needs a lot more awareness. Okay. But yeah. So let's talk CES. Back to tech. CES is consumer electronics show. It's a yearly expo where a lot of companies go and like exhibit like a bunch of things that they feel like would be, electronics and tech products that are going to be very impactful or instrumental to the consumer market in general for that year or in the near horizon. So you'll find even guys like Sony, LG, like, they're big participants in CES every year, showing off the latest screens and the OLEDs.
I remember, I think it was like 2 years ago, Sony and was it PlayStation?
Yeah, and
they did a collab where they built a car.
Yeah, they did a car. Actually, concept cars are like a whole big segment of CES. And so it's one of those fun things I'm just saying fun because they rarely translate into the actual production, but it's a fun thing to just go and look
to
at
see and to
where these come
to marvel or to wonder at what could be.
Yeah.
I think the only company that I think has the guts to try to move their ideas from that concept to a product is Lenovo.
Yeah, Lenovo is the one that actually translates. Remember the foldable laptop thing?
The foldable laptop.
Yeah, that was like CES like 2-3 years
I don't know
before
if
it
they're
hit the
extending
mass market.
screen
The
ever
extending
made it to
screen.
market, but I think they try to put an effort.
Yeah. So there's a lot of companies that participate in CES, like the biggest companies in the world. And I think particularly what we wanted to zero in was, maybe not even for the purpose of CES, was Nvidia. Nvidia is a very fascinating company. By all means, 2024 was their, if somebody had a stellar year, it had to be Nvidia. That's the year that they became the most valuable company in the world. That's the year that their GPUs took off because of the advent and the rise of AI. They did exhibit like a couple of cool products as well. A bunch of, GPUs that came out. They did a whole CPU called Digits. Very interesting as a piece of tech, but that's on a side note. But we wanted to discuss Nvidia as well. Like Nvidia presents, how do I say? Nvidia is that company that presents a very interesting conflict of ideas. So there was a question, Evans, who I think we wanted to discuss, like about even Nvidia's foray into the consumer market. Are they just trying to kind of grow into their valuation? Because I know that we heavily suspect that they are heavily overpriced, but hey, they're also valuable. So like, is it like a whole type of play to find a balance of trying to get into it?
Yeah, so the interest, I mean, there's a saying that always goes that, in a gold rush, he who makes the most money is the one who sells shovels. And we are definitely in a gold rush of AI of sorts. Not to say that AI is like a fad or anything, but if I could use an example, I'd point back to the .com bubble era. And if I'm not wrong, one of the highest grossing companies at that time was Cisco, because being the people providing the networks.
Cisco became extremely. I think, was it like top? It was definitely in the top 10 most valuable companies.
Yes, but as the .com bubble popped, and now we started seeing realistic valuations, and businesses that were fundamentally broken to beginning, those that were weeded out. That's when they plummeted in terms of the valuation. I think my opinion is that Nvidia is kind of going through the same thing, where a lot of the valuation banks on the valuation of the companies that are running on their rails on the infrastructure to survive. So a lot of a lot of their processors are going to the Microsoft and the Googles and the AWSs, so that they can also sell to AI companies who. So it's a layer of potential across each, but the problem is that if any one of those starts to drop, like if let's say we get to a point where AI is not as marketable, or it stabilizes, and the valuations of the companies that provide AI products drop
in that sector,
then it trickles down to the data centers, people who provide computing
for that, and
they are buying Nvidia chips to train their models on, and so they have to really be at a point where their projections for sales have to grow exponentially in the coming years, which could prove to be a challenge. And I think we had pointed out, we had noticed that they are also trying to lead in terms of putting investments into a lot of AI.
Yeah, but don't you think like that's a really cool strategy? That's like almost what Cisco didn't do. See, like Nvidia being a big backer of companies in that particular vertical. In fact, Nvidia has participated in like, I think one of the most like number of rounds of anything not over $100 million, like in companies in AI. And almost often they participate in rounds for like, antagonistic companies. Like they might invest in Anthropic and let's say it's OpenAI in the same breath. These are opposing companies, but they're all consuming Nvidia, GPUs, and they will invest. I think Nvidia partnered with X as well, with Tesla, with Elon Musk to do Grok as well. And Grok, I think, is doing like some crazy computing thing. So they're literally investing, they're literally investing their way into their valuation.
Yes, but
and that's a good strategy, because if you can't build it, buy your way into it. I think that's a very solid. Like I would do that any day if I were Nvidia.
That's a solid plan for them, except for one main thing, that the problem isn't necessarily with the companies themselves. Of course, if you invest in money in all this potential, one of them is going to succeed and probably make back everything that you invested in all this. The problem is the valuation as opposed to the actual market value.
Okay, now that's where I think we disagree.
We disagree.
Yeah. So for me, and maybe even the audience can say, but for me, I think AI is it's not a fad kind of wave, technological wave. I think its value is still gonna get better and better.
Yes, I'm agreeing. I agree with you. And even at the beginning,
but
said,
essentially what you're saying
is
that you're saying AI companies are gonna be bust. You say that about crypto. Okay,
I said
arguably, but but
no. What I'm saying is that AI, on its own merits, is very valuable. Okay. However, it is possible that the valuation that we've currently given it, that a lot of these companies are at, is not indicative of the actual market value.
Oh, okay.
And so
fair enough.
Problem is that even if I invest all this money in all these companies,
it's going to be
the value of AI at that is really not worth that money, then I'm still going to lose money anyway. I might be the biggest player. My valuation may still be quite high. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to lose. But what I'm saying is that like with the .com bubble, everything that had a .com was seen as going to the moon. Again, also with crypto as well, where everything that was crypto was going to the moon.
Arguably.
But when the gold rush came to an end, people started to say, okay, these are the things that are actually valuable. Everything else is mostly not. And even if I put all my money across the board,
but you see,
there was still something lost.
You see, no, this is what I want you to kind of get into that mental calculus, Evans. The opportunity cost of missing an investment opportunity in whatever we call a hype or a trend is much higher than losing the investment. At least that is the calculus that I think all these guys doing the gold rush, are making, because they're like, if this thing actually becomes sector defining, if this thing actually becomes an inflection point for how technology is going to be done, I would much rather be on the side of the person who invested than having sat out. Because, bro, when you think about all the companies that come and die, they all die because of one thing. It's the missed opportunity that they didn't take. MySpace didn't acquire Facebook and MySpace died. Remember, Blockbuster didn't acquire Netflix and Blockbuster died. It's not even about, are you sure about Netflix being a valuable company in 10 years? Just buy it. Because it makes sense.
We agree with you on the same thing, except for one problem.
Bubbles are part of the system. Like, it's almost like, you see, my argument against you is that you're saying bubbles are necessarily wrong. Me, my argument is like, bubbles are part of it. Like, we need a hype. We need a hype season. And then we need the hype season to die.
No, I'm not saying bubbles are wrong, but let me give you a hypothetical. So let's say Nvidia sold 1,000 GPUs last year because there were about 1,000 AI companies out there. Now, those AI companies, so their stock price is not just an indication of how much they've sold today, but how much they're expected to sell tomorrow or 5 years or 10 years to come. So whatever, let's say if they're valued at $10, they might it may climb to like $50 because they're expecting in the next year they might sell 1,000 or more GPUs, and then the next year more. But if you're in a bubble and that bubble pops in this year, you will sell 500 GPUs, and so your stock price does not match the expected earnings.
But the bubble will burst and the correction will begin.
Yes.
And that's my point.
There'll be a correction. It doesn't mean that they'll die or like they're going down. But what I'm saying is that stock price might still drop, especially as a cascading effect of all the other companies that are relying
on that sector.
That sector.
Yeah.
So if half the AI companies, let's say, theoretically died in
25,
how much less GPUs will Nvidia sell? And this is in light of how much they were expecting to sell more, because they were not anticipating that this thing that
the bubble is going to burst.
Pop. So that is what I'm saying is that there is a kind of a fragile situation where there's more potential that is priced into their stock than actual sales.
Here's my argument then. My argument in general is that when you're competing at that scale, there is no day that you're not going to be in a fragile situation. Like,
fair.
It's almost like saying, like, there's no one who's guaranteed staying at the top. In fact, I'd even say the moment you're the top company in the world, that is the most fragile you can ever be. You know? maybe even the top 20. That's okay. Like, Amazon is cruising nicely. Microsoft is cruising nicely, man. Being the number 2 in every vertical for like a decade. Like they're happy. In fact, I'd even say those are like the least fragile people in the $1 trillion club, right? Guys like Tesla are very fragile.
They're very fragile.
They're known for that. But you see, they're the number 1 car company right now in the world, and we've talked about it already. So like there is no day, no way in which you won't be the number 1 leading company and are not participating in the highest risk vertical. And I think for me, that's Nvidia, and I think it's good, and I think it's a bubble. I agree with you, but I think a bubble is part of the system. It is a design of the system, and I think it is.
Let me ask
in fact, we should ride the bubble.
Let me ask a question. A prediction for 5 years, and then hopefully this show will still be there. Bigger, please subscribe.
Yes.
So we can make that happen. But which one do you think is likely to be a bigger company between Apple and Nvidia in the next 5 years? Which one is likely to stay at the top?
Which one is likely to stay at the top? I love Nvidia, but I'm a very big proponent of Lindy's law. If you've been at the top longer, you're most likely gonna stay at the top longer. So I'd probably hedge my bets more with Apple, with Microsoft, even with Google.
Yeah, and therein lies
over Nvidia.
my fundamental thesis about Nvidia. But time will tell.
The long term. But anyway, I actually wanted to leave this episode as well with a prediction. I kind of missed that wave, but Tesla is gonna buy Uber. I'm waiting for it, and when it happens, I hope that subscription button was worth it, because you heard it here first.
You called it.
But anyway, the point is, I think Nvidia is still gonna ride the wave in 25, in my opinion, because if I look at AI in general, people are saying that we're at level 3, which is normally around super agents and stuff, as on our way towards AGI, the grand AGI that nobody knows what it is, but we're all talking about what it is. So I think Nvidia is still on the trajectory up this year. I think there are more AI companies being backed, being valued right now. I think the AI hype is going to be longer than the crypto hype for sure, but I also think the utility for AI is a lot more than the utility for crypto, which is interesting. Is there going to be a new vertical that's going to be potentially game-changing? Yes, I'm looking at quantum computing as well as a vertical, but that one
do not bring quantum
for
computing
the next episode. For the next episode, we're not going to go there. But hey, I'm just saying, as far as I'm concerned, so far, so good. This year, I'm still bullish.
We shall tackle quantum in the next episode.
Yeah. But
where fight is guaranteed to ensue.
Yeah. I know when you talk quantum, you're just going to be like, so crypto is dead. Nah. And
they're all dead.
You know what? Leave that for the next episode, guys. It's been good. It's been fun. Cheers. Leave your comments. Leave your questions, your complaints, your concerns.
Hit like if you like the episode. If you didn't like the episode, send it to someone you hate. You'll take views either way.
Bruh. It's true. Anyway, cheers, guys. See you on the next episode. It's been fun. I'm Dominic. Happy to host.
And I'm Evans.